Welcome, everyone, and happy Earth Day to you all. I'm Allison Van Dyke. I'm the Executive Director of the Temple of Understanding, a 62-year-old interfaith organization whose mission is to advocate for interfaith values in the secular setting of the United Nations. And as NGOs around the world, our focus for the past 11 years has been to increase the awareness of religious leaders and actors of our climate crisis and its negative impact on achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, peace, justice, women's health and safety, food sovereignty, and environmental sustainability. Today, our moderator, who's going to talk about the topic, Let's Go Organic, Empowering Local Food Systems, is David Chapman. David runs the Long Wind Farm in Vermont, where he grows tomatoes. He's also the executive director of the Real Organic Project. He's a founding member of Vermont's Organic Farmers and has been active in the movement to keep the soil inorganic. He's a member of the policy committee of the Organic Farmers Association, and he serves on the USDA Hydroponic Task Force. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Allison. So, hi, everybody. We're just going to have a very informal conversation today. We have three people on this panel, Spencer Fenneman and Sarah Tasker, and I'm going to allow both of you to introduce yourselves and just tell people a little bit about what you're doing and how you got there, and work into that about how this is part of your spiritual or faith tradition. Maybe your spiritual work does not have a tradition, but however you would answer that question. So let's start with Sarah.
Hi, good morning. I'm here at the Green Gulch Farm Zen Center. It's part of the San Francisco Zen Center. We're just right north of the Golden Gate Bridge on the coast, surrounded by the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Muir Woods is down the road. We're in an amazing part of the world, and what we do is grow people and soil and food. So people who come here, young people, are looking for a practice in this world and both a livelihood. Many of them come to train in organic farming, and also spiritual practice. So we're a Zen Buddhist training temple. And this is how I came here, actually, trying to understand as a young person how to live in this world where it felt like there was so much greed, hate, and delusion. How could I be part of creating an alternative to that? How to create change in the world? And that led me first to organic farming. I felt like farming was a way to take responsibility for my immediate impact on the world. You know, on a farm, there's no away. Your trash is over there, your metal recycling's over there, right? You deal with what you produce, and you see the cause and effect. You see the cause and effect, right? So I was looking for a way to take responsibility for myself that was a scale that I could wrap my head around. And when I came to Green Gulch Farm, which offers an annual apprenticeship in organic farming, what I realized was I was looking for something bigger. I was looking for what's underneath that, which is not only taking responsibility through my livelihood, but through my the body, speech, and mind. So the root of all of the suffering that we see in the world, and wanting to transform that along with the earth and the plants and the ecosystems that we're living in. So that's where I am. And I began this journey about 20 years ago when I came to Green Gulch Farm, and have been on the path of supporting all life through my Buddhist vows and through my farming practice since then.
Spencer, a little bit
Thank you,
about
Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Spencer Fenneman, and I'm the Director of Farming at Hawthorne Valley Farm, which is about 2.5 hours north of New York City in the Hudson Valley. We are part of a larger nonprofit, the Hawthorne Valley Association, which was started in 1972 as an effort to bring children from Waldorf schools onto the land and to experience farming. And a whole host of kind of activities developed from there, including a farm, which has dairy cows and crop production, as well as a school, and then other nonprofit activities include continuing to bring children onto the land, as well as work with farmscape ecologies. And I came here 11 years ago, and Hawthorne Valley Farm is also a longtime practitioner of biodynamic agriculture. And when I started farming, I think it was a little similar to Sarah in kind of an effort to, as a first generational farmer, to kind of ground myself in a practice that was, you were able to manifest change, whether it was on a very small scale. And as I continued farming, the introduction to livestock into any sort of crop operation was really kind of something that drew me. And what drew me into biodynamics was really looking at a farm and seeing how that farm related to, first, everything that is growing around the farm, the context outside the farm. And I think with the biodynamic practice and the approach, it's an opportunity for us to kind of peel back different layers and see what's actually influencing how our farms are operating and how our farms are productive. To look back and look at the forest and see how the forest is influencing the fields, and look back and, perhaps go even towards how the influences of the cosmic activity is impacting plant growth. And I really like what Sarah said, where we grow people. And what I think our farm, and what really drew me to Hawthorne Valley, is this opportunity to grow people, although much younger children, who can have this really intimate interaction with a cow and milk a cow in the morning, or really get up and close to a compost pile and, uncover the layers of what's growing in that compost pile. And I think that farms can be these wonderful places where people can come and really experience all these different life processes that happen at the same time. And I think that for us, it's growing the farm in a way that we can really accentuate those experiences.
Yeah. So I'm really kind of fascinated. I went to Green Gulch a gazillion years ago, Sarah, when I was just a young farmer. So I don't know when that would have been, something like 1982 or something. But I'm curious, do you know, when did Green Gulch start as a farm?
I do. Well, I mean, how far do you want to go back? The 1800s, the Portuguese were farming this valley. Before that, the Coast Miwok were tending the wild. Zen Center acquired the property in 1972. Green Gulch was founded. So right at the same time. And I've had the great fortune to be part of a wonderful lineage of Zen farmers and a wonderful lineage of people who have cared for this valley. So right around the same time, an amazing generation of people.
Well, Yeah, so Spencer, how about Hawthorne Valley? I never been to Hawthorne Valley, but I certainly went to Camp Hill in Pennsylvania long ago, part of the same movement. Do you know about what year Hawthorne Valley began as a biodynamic farm?
Yeah, it did start in 1972 with the
Yeah.
acquisition of a existing farm, and I think really farming operations began maybe in 1975 or so. Where really started the dairy herd then.
So we started, and I graduated from high school in 1971, and it was the tail end of the Vietnam War, and it was a time of tremendous upheaval in America, precipitated really by that war, and it created a revolution in thinking, and many things changed in the 60s and the 70s as a result of that. I really got into farming almost to step away from politics. It was still meant to manifest my beliefs and how I thought we should live and care for each other. But I was kind of burned out on arguing with Congress and going to protest marches, which is kind of funny because it's what I do a lot of now.
I was gonna say, it didn't get far, Dave.
It goes around, but in between, I spent 35 years or whatever very quietly farming in a almost solitary way. I mean, the people on the farm, we're a vegetable farm, so we have a lot of people, but it's interesting that even so, it was political, but it wasn't something that we talked about. We didn't talk about politics or government or anything like that. And I think all of my farm, your farms, the Real Organic Project, all of these things are actually about a movement. And I love that you come from different traditions, and I come from a different tradition, and but we all agree on so much. And so our subject for today was Let's Go Organic, Empowering Local Food Systems. And some of the questions that were suggested were basically about the organic as an alternative to an industrial food system, which is what we all imagined it to be. And lately, and why I've become political in an obvious way, once again, is it seems like the word organic is being used as a shield by those same industrial food systems. And so, and to explain to people who don't maybe understand that statement, there are things being certified as organic by the USDA now that I would not consider to be at all organic. And they're very much in variance from what the rest of the world calls organic. So we see this redefinition of a word. And I actually think words are very important. And I think that redefinition is very important. What do you think?
Maybe I'll just jump in. My thought is that the meaning is not in the word. We say this in Zen. The meaning is not in the word, right? So what organic is, maybe I'd say right now is caring, humility, love. It is, so in that way, I've never met a farmer who isn't in some way spiritual. When you are in relationship with something you understand you can't control and that you care about and that you're intimate with, it's hard not to, feel that humility, right? And feel your small place in something larger, your small place in relationship to life. And that's what I feel particularly with organic farming, because what it's concerned with is the relationship of all life, and nothing can be left out. There can't be any compartmentalization. This is also true of Buddhism, right? Like one of the foundational truths is interdependence. So this is also an ecological truth, and it's a truth of working with anything alive, actually, if you study it deeply enough. So I forget what your question was, but my
of answering the question.
but yeah, organic, I feel, is spiritual, right? And I feel this upheaval you were talking about, it is happening now. It is happening in a different way with climate change, with a loss of faith in institutions that have been unable to have some kind of positive response based in love and reality and relationship, right? So I think this, what we're doing, growing people who care, growing people who are actually interested in what's happening on the farms, with the farmers they buy from, on the farms, in the soil, with their local economy. This caring is actually the condition for change, right? For positive change in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well said. Spencer?
Yeah, I think that, the foundation of our practice, whether it's biodynamic farming, whether it's organic farming, is soil, and it's a relationship to soil, and it's building that over time. I find biodynamic agriculture is an entry point into a certain way of framing that relationship that we build over time. Organic farming, I think from the onset, if predating my arrival at Hawthorne Valley, organic was a label that also was kind of meeting that definition that we felt comfortable defining ourselves. And as we sell yogurt on a shelf in a store, not in a direct connection to people, we felt that we could put a word on our packaging that said, this is something that we feel is conveying kind of the relationship aspect of the earth to the cows, to the product, and that people could see that and recognize that. And I would say that over time, I'm not sure that there's a little bit of cynicism that's developed with that label. And I think that perhaps culminating in kind of a soilless relationship to organic production. So I think that I agree completely with Sarah that there is a spiritual approach on every farm, whether it's said or not, in that we are all in relationship and we're building this relationship. I think that organic farming, because it's really focused on that relationship, because you are not going to succeed without a healthy soil, without a healthy connection of your inner being to that soil. I think that really has a possibility to be that relationship, and that name, I think, is something that I know we would like to see continue. And so I think that a project like the Real Organic Project is actually conveying that message out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Sarah said, the label, the word isn't the important thing, it's the meaning. And of course, we all agree with that. But one of the things that I've come to believe is that, in fact, words are important. And if there's a thing that's happening, and it's not just about organic, it's happening in many, many areas where there are people who see an opportunity to make a lot of money if they can represent themselves as something other than what they are. And this is, their attempt to persuade people that we are, in fact, what you want. And it's called greenwashing. And organic is something where there's a struggle to redefine organic, and there's a struggle to keep the meaning closer to caring, humility, and love, and where I believe it started. This panel is meant to be, let's go organic, empowering local food systems. And okay, it's got a power word in there. So it's really saying, well, how do we build, or let's even put a greener word. Let's say, how do we grow local food systems? And the question for me is, is organic going to be an integral part of that? Or as people recognize that these industrial farms that are making a lot of money, but they're not what we meant, and not just because of their scale, but because of their practices, because of how they treat people, because of the nutrition of the food, because of the lack of soil health, all these things. It's not what we meant. So one thing we could do is move to another label. We could call ourselves agroecological or regenerative, but we see the same thing happening to those terms. They're faster than us. So what are your thoughts? How do we respond to that? Are we having a fight? Are we nobly moving on and going to a new playground because the bully knocked us off the swing? What are your thoughts?
I think in keeping with the concept of relationship, with the community supported agriculture model, is really at its heart about bringing the community into relationship with the farm, the farmer, and the soil, and really kind of dissolving some of those boundaries between consumer and producer. And that is empowering to both the consumer, to the farmer, and I think to the soil as well. Now, there's usually no need for a label in that relationship. And I think that the label comes in when we can't have that direct relationship. We don't have necessarily the kind of system to be set up to be completely in relationship. The consumer and the producer are usually, there's some boundary between them, whether it's a store or a distributor to a store or a distributor to a distributor to a store. And I think that in the absence of that direct relationship, I think it's incredibly important that there is a label by which the consumer and the producer can be in relationship. And I think that's where labels can be valuable, like a standard. But as you said, it's very hard because there isn't that close connection. I think inventing words is always going to be a challenge. We can invent any number of terms to create a new label. But when there is already a word that I think is, in many people's mind, means one thing, but once it goes through those different filters, by the time the consumer gets it, it might be a very different. So I do think that there is a place for reclaiming terms that can allow the producer and the consumer to be in closer relationship.
Yeah.
May I also respond in a slightly different way, which is, I'm thinking about, empowering people, right? And thinking about who is actually listening to this dialogue, right? Who's listening to this conversation, who's tuned in. And these are probably people that they are giving their time, using their life energy to become more intimate and knowledgeable about these things, right? So these are the people who can do something, actually, who can be in relationship. You know, what farmers need is support. What local food systems need is more energy and relationship. I was thinking of a friend of mine and a friend of yours, Dave, amigo Bob Contasano, an organic pioneer here in California, who worked for much of his life. He worked with conventional farmers. He helped them. He understood that most farmers want to be good farmers. Most farmers, there is something they care about and they're interested in. And he supported them by helping them understand a different way to farm and engaging them and engaging their love and interest in growing things in a way that opened it up, right? They were farming that way mostly because that's how they were told and taught to farm, using chemicals. And once you open someone's eyes and give them an opportunity, I believe, once you really give people an opportunity to express care and love and connection and support life in a way that they can feel and see and comes back to them, I believe people make that choice. And especially farmers. Farmers are hard workers, right? So this is different than industrial farming, where nobody is the farmer, right? There's just employees. So this is a different relationship. So I feel like being in relationship with not only the organic farmers in your area, but the conventional farmers. What do they need? What are they interested in? How can you support them? Do they know that you want to support them and you want to see more organic in your area? I think building relationships in your community, talking to people about what you care about. I mean, this is what you do all the time, Dave. You go around the country and tell people what's important to you and find out what's important to them and give them that little boost of inspiration and encouragement that what they do matters. And yeah, I'm really a kind of, once I get into politics or policy, my brain kind of explodes, which is why I, spend my days planting plants and doing what's in front of me. But these are all things that are right in front of us, the ability to talk to another human being and to express that we care about them and be interested in what they're doing. This is right in front of us. Yeah.
I agree very much, Sarah, but it's interesting. I did spend, to my astonishment, some years in the last 8 years actually lobbying the USDA and Congress to reform, and we failed. But I tried. We tried. A lot of people tried. And when we failed, then we started the Real Organic Project as an attempt to really follow your path, which is, we're going to stop asking for permission and we're just going to do it. And we're going to create a movement, and it's really just coalescing the movement that was always there, but that I think the organic movement really lost a sense of direction when the USDA took over certification. Mm-hmm. I used to go to annual meetings with all the farmers in Vermont, and we would vote on the standards, and we would have a potluck, and it was a real time of engagement. And those meetings kind of stopped because we were no longer in charge of the standards. It was a fascinating, process. With the Real Organic Project, we're trying to basically come back to that. But so let me just say an example of talking to farms. Until about 6 years ago, it looked like organic farming was going to be the salvation of Vermont's small dairy farms. And if you wanted to stay in business, you had to learn how to do this in an organic way, and you could make a living again, because you was getting to where you couldn't make a living as a conventional small farmer. The big farms were just dominating that market. And here's a place where people will pay more for your milk if it's grown in a certain way. And they love that you're a small farm. It's like, everything is working just according to plan. And that's gone now. That's no longer the salvation. And in fact, organic farms in Vermont are going out of business. And it's because the price is so depressed, and it's because the USDA is certifying these huge CAFOs, confinement operations, out in Texas and Colorado, and they're flooding the market with cheap milk. And so we see that even in a place like Vermont, which is a virtual, organic haven, you see that we're not alone. We're not an island that has no connection to the mainland. We are all part of one huge global food system. So it does matter what the USDA does. It does affect these poor small farmers, even conventional ones in Vermont. And so that's, for me, the Real Organic Project is about a label so that we can find each other, but it's also about a dialogue, a movement that we need to have with each other, farmers, and with eaters.
Yes.
We saw in the tractorcade of the 70s that all farmers and no eaters makes for a great news story, but it doesn't change anything.
Mm.
We really need to have it. In fact, you remember Sarah Paul Muller said that night at Full Belly Farm when I met you. He spoke eloquently about that. And I think that's always been true for the project. Now, you're both involved with a lot of community dialogue. It almost defines both farms, I would say. You see that, as you said, your main crop is people and maybe even understanding, right? So you're both actually reaching out to a lot of people that you never see because you both are influencers in that way. How do you feel about that? How do you think about that? Do you accept that as part of your job, that you willingly say, I am trying to actually influence the culture as well as the living people that I meet with every day?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I understand that I'm both conditioned by the world and a condition of the world. Each of us are. And so when you understand that what you do is a condition for what happens, it's super empowering. And helping to understand what conditions have what results, right? Studying this, right? When I do this, that happens. When I do this, that happens, right? Of course, we can't see all of it, but this is the basis of farming, and this is the basis of human relationships. When somebody smiles at me, I smile, So this is super important. And I think to your point of maybe what I'm talking about isn't enough. Of course, it's not enough. All of us are needed, and your strengths are different than my strengths. And so growing people, just, having people tune into some kind of moral groundedness, and kind of paying attention to the ethical dimension of our life together. And I don't mean just ethical in terms of human relationships, but ethical in terms of our relationships with all life, all beings, right? The human and more than human world. So having people in the world who have many different skills and many different strengths. For some people, what's right in front of them is lobbying Congress, right? They're really good at it. And they can read these bills, and then they can say something about it, and they can organize people. This is, this is not my scale, but it's somebody's scale. So each of us can find what is our gift, and how can we be a positive condition of this change we all want to see. And and give our energy to that, you know, and also conserve our energy, or like tend to our energy, right? So it's not all out and then burn out. It's renewal. It's in and out. It's like breathing.
Dave, I wanted to touch a little on when you were talking about small organic dairy farms as a dairy farm ourselves. I think that in our specific area, we farm what probably used to be about 7 small farms of land. And a lot of those fields we come and cut hay on and still interact with, but our interaction isn't nearly as intimate as if we were a dairy farm on that land, and that we had our own cow herds and we were living on that land. And I think that with the dairy industry, what you have is you might lose the number of farms, but you're going to keep the same number of cows, which is going to require the same land base as you have consolidation. And with the loss of each of those small organic farms, I think what you're really losing is this deep connection to place that those farmers hold, that those cows are holding. And, you know, the cows are their own entity that are going to be transmitting multi-generational awareness of a place. And I think there's really something lost there. And perhaps the end product material is going to be the same, whether it's milk from Texas or milk from Vermont. It's, you know, materially it might be milk, but the depth of that product, and I think the ability to build the soil in that area through intention, the ability to kind of build the community through that kind of intimate relationship to the land that the cows and the farmer have, is really something that's, I think, we are going to be deprived as a whole, as our whole society, with the absence of that. And if it was a name like organics that was allowing that to continue, I think it's really something to fight for, is to fight for the ability of farmers to maintain that relationship, for cows to maintain that relationship on lands going forward.
Yeah. One thing I would disagree about, Spencer, is that, you know, that milk from Texas and milk from Vermont are basically the same thing. I think they're basically quite different.
Sure, from a commodity material point of view, we might say milk is milk, but I think they're exceptionally different.
Perspective, but from the eater's perspective, I don't think they taste the same, and I don't think the nutrition is the same. And from the community perspective, the ways in which we live in the world we want to live in, those huge CAFOs are absolutely not producing the world any of us want to live anywhere close to. And we do want to live next to Hawthorne Valley, you know, and we do want to live next to Green Gulch. Like, what wonderful neighbors. So they're really very different paradigms of what agriculture should or could be, and what it will be. You know, one thing when we talk about fighting and we talk about, it's nice, empowering local food systems doesn't talk about a fight. And I don't think, we'll never win a fight, honestly, with Godzilla. But I think that our challenge isn't to win legislatively. I don't know the answer to this, because I feel like, well, ultimately we've got to reform the laws, or we're never going to get where we need to get to just to survive as a species. But in the short run, I really think we need to build a movement of people connecting. And I know there are millions of people in America who want real organic food. They want to support those farms. That's the food they want to eat and feed their family. And the question is, you know, how do we engage in a lively enough conversation that people want to join it and become part of that? And that's where what you both do is important, in that you have a microphone, And I think all farmers have a bigger microphone than, say, most plumbers. People listen to farmers. They go, oh, what does the farmer think? And I think organic farmers have an even bigger microphone. And I think both of your farms have an even bigger microphone because they're prominent, because they are models of something that we yearn for. And so then you have a responsibility to use that microphone well. How do you talk to the rest of the world? What avenues do you use? Is it just a lived example, or do you write things, or do you give talks? I mean, I expect that at Green Gulch there are probably regular Dharma talks that people come to, but I don't know, Sarah, could you talk about that?
Yeah, there's regular weekly Dharma talks on Sunday mornings here at Green Gulch Farm. Wendy Johnson, a wonderful organic gardener, horticulturalist, practitioner, teacher, just gave a talk a few weeks ago. That will be on the Zen Center website soon. So not all of them are necessarily from people based in on the land, working the land, but many of them, it's a treasure trove. And I think, you know, what the Dharma is about relationship, right? So when you say we're not going to win the war, you know, my great faith is in wisdom and compassion, right? Wisdom and embodying wisdom and compassion in the world, which is love, you know, in some way. It is this, the way we feel when we understand we're connected and we care, right? So Dharma talks, the Dharma is the way that we support people, because when you care, then it's like, oh, I care about the food, I care about the people, I care about the soil, I care about the water, I care what happens, and I want to take responsibility. You know, this is what grows out of spiritual practice. So I would say the Dharma is the biggest thing. We also send our food out. We also feed people bread. You know, we bake bread. We understand that sometimes the way to the Dharma is through bread, through your stomach, you know. So we do all these things, and I do talks like this, and we have school groups coming through. People hike through, thousands and thousands of people hike through Green Gulch every year. It's part of the GGNRA trail system. So yeah, I think we try to be an example. I think we try and be available for people. We try and provide encouragement. Yeah, this is what we can do with our lifetimes, and then people can come here, you know, and we can have more sustained, prolonged conversations and relationships.
Yeah.
You know, we have former apprentices that are working for the EPA. We have former apprentices that are running gardens for the homeless community. We have a number of farmers. We have people kind of everywhere who take this out into the world in amazing ways.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing, is that the young people, usually young people, who come and work at a place like Green Gulch and then go out. I've been amazed talking to Elliot Coleman at how many people who have apprenticed on his farm have gone and started amazing things, and
Yes.
many of them not in agriculture at all, but some, you know,
Yes.
very much. Like in our book club last month, Larry Jacobs showed up from Jacobs Del Cabo, and he was an apprentice on Elliot's farm. That's where he met his wife, and of course they went on and organized a whole cooperative of small farms in Mexico to bring their products, their organic products, up to the U.S. Very, very interesting. Yeah, that's great. I wasn't thinking of that. What about you, Spencer? What?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, our voice is going towards people under the age of 17. That's an arbitrary cutoff, but I think our most impassioned way of putting forward our message is with the children that are either in our school or in our program called the Visiting Students Program. And these are children who are coming and learning that milk is warm and not cold, that cows, not just bulls, have horns, that you can cuddle a pig, that, you know, what it takes to turn a compost pile or plant a plant. And perhaps that's a long view, but I think that children really are the biggest instruments of change on a cultural level. And the opportunity to kind of provide a place where children can get dirty and kind of get a different concept of a lot of kind of what we typically, you know, really dissolve the boundaries between what's art, what's academia, what's agriculture, all these things as kind of one holistic approach towards living on Earth, I think radiates out, because they come home and they say, I want to eat collard greens. And, you know, and that type of change is inspiring. I think that beyond that, being an open farm is really important. Bringing people onto farms to see that, yes, they might be messy. They might have different odors, but that opportunity really, I think, it's kind of a visceral awareness that really doesn't translate in a great Instagram post or a blog. You know, those things are important, but I think way more important is really bringing people onto agricultural spaces to develop that intimate awareness. And yeah, I think talking, writing, photos, those are all great, but I do think that, you know, having people actually have feet on the soil, have hands in the dirt, you know, herd a cow in is really what's required. And that's a big ask for farms, because farms are busy. But I think farmers are also great. If people come onto their farm, farmers usually want to talk to them about what they're doing. And I think that's a real avenue for making change.
Yeah.
You know, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, just two things. One is we have wonderful community partners here in Marin. The Agricultural Institute of Marin does all sorts of organizing of getting school kids out to farms, so farmers don't have to do that work, right? So that's another place that you could work in your local food system, is facilitating that kind of thing and making it as easy for the farmer as possible to share what they're doing. And for kids to get out there, because I don't have time to do that, right? So there's that. And also, just Spencer, you said something about the long game, right? Like getting kids out. And I think, I mean, farming is the long game, right? There's some things that I do on my farm that I do once a year, right? Once a season, I plant the potatoes, right? So it's like, I have to wait a whole nother year to apply what I have learned, right? Building soil, and then I've forgotten, of course, building soil is a long-term investment. So we have to play the long game. Of course, there's immediate things. I mean, I'm looking at you, Dave, and thinking, yes, but be a realist, right? But both, we have to operate in both timescales. Yeah, and saying that, this is a little out there maybe. I think a lot, given the pandemic, given the climate instability, given the real political divisiveness that's happening now, I think coming out of scarcity, right? And things are changing. It's already changing. The industrial food system, I think, is not actually going to last forever. I was just on a panel with a regional food buyer for Safeway. You know, this huge, this is somebody who works in the food system in an exponentially larger scale than I do. And he saw the same thing, right? So things are going to shift. They are shifting every day. We know this as farmers, that the climate has changed, right? Nothing is reliable. So I don't mean to say this in a doom and gloom way. I think it's really an opportunity. Opportunities will keep coming up, and if we are awake to them and help build what we need to survive, which is actually more local and regional food systems, we can support what we want to see, which is relationship-based, place-based, long-term investment, and real organic, really.
Yeah. Okay, I have two short stories, one for each. It was interesting. I was thinking about getting people on the farm, and you know, and I was just listening to an interview I did with Paul Holmbeck, who ran. He's an American, but he ran Organic Denmark for some years, and they get 4% of the population of Denmark onto an organic farm every year. Well, actually 5%. It's just an amazing number if you think about it. 4% of those, most of those they have an agreement on all the organic farms in Denmark that on a given Saturday or Sunday, they're going to let the cows out of the barn in the spring. And you know, when cows go out of the barn,
That is glorious day.
you get to see joy in an animal that is just, I mean, you can't help but just laugh out loud. They're so happy. And they've set this up so all over Denmark, they're all doing it on the same day, and it's become a national holiday of everyone going to see the cows run. So that's just a beautiful example of how you bring the people to the farm, and in a way that doesn't make it that the farmer doesn't have time to farm. It all comes on one day. It's a big party. Everyone brings their food, and they just have a great time. The other thing is what you were saying, Sarah. So, you know, I got to interview Michael Pollan last fall, and it was a tremendously interesting conversation. And I asked Michael, do you think things are getting better or worse in our food system? And he said both. He said the awareness is growing tremendously, so that people are talking about carbon sequestration and soil health. He said, I've got students now at Harvard who are seriously interested in these conversations. In fact, I hired one of his students. She's fantastic. So, and he said, so we see this growth of the public awareness and imagination that's very positive. He said, but in the actual food production system, we see ever greater concentration, you know, of wealth and power. And you talk about the buyer for Safeway. Well, there are fewer and fewer even chains. They're all owned by some multinational or another. So there's actually less choice in the marketplace because, and certainly if you're a small farm, you can't even get on a shelf. And I thought that was such an interesting answer. And it, you know, it really, and I agree that, well, ultimately, this public conversation is going to change the food system itself. But in the meantime, there is this difference between small and the farmers markets and the CSA and farm stands and the supermarkets, which are becoming more and more homogenous and vertically integrated. And they're buying milk from companies they own. And you know.
Right. And I mean, what was interesting to me was this person who had been working in the large industrial foods, I mean, for decades. This person who's really intimate with all of it basically said he thought it wasn't sustainable, and that it, you know, his job is to find all the food for those places. And he says, I can't do it. It's gotten too big. It's too big to fail, and it's failing, right? So this is an opportunity for the right person, he says, I can't do my job. And this panel was about what policies could we have, public policy that would support a sustainable food system? What have we learned from the pandemic, right? And one thing I said was, well, could we educate the eaters? Could the government spend time helping people see that we cannot get everything we want all the time at the lowest price? That this is, and so this buyer for Safeway said amen to that, because that falls on him to fulfill those expectations, and we can't fulfill them anymore. It's actually, I think that era is gone, that illusion. I think it's gone. So
yes, so much of this paradigm shift involves changing habits, and I think climate in a way was a habit for us, and our consumer practices are habits, and we can't keep consuming, and I would say that a challenge in all this is land access and the cost of land and the consolidation of ownership of land, because those are major impediments towards recasting the food system. It's very hard for small producers to currently make a living on the land prices as they are. And
So
I don't know what that challenge, where that goes, but.
good. I know that, yes, there's another can of worms, isn't it? So before we go on, I haven't seen comments, but if somebody who is listening to this would like to ask a question, please just put it into the chat and leave a question mark on it, and you can use the Q&A function, but you can put it in the chat. Just put a question mark. I will see it. I'm watching. So yeah, land ownership is huge, and we know that it has become, almost entirely focused on it has excluded people of color more and more. I mean, fascinatingly, it's not that it was always that way. It's become more and more. One of the things that I see, and they go together, but if you give someone access to land, but then they still can't make a living, we see people who own their farms going out of business. We can't even keep the farmers we've got, never mind bringing in new farmers. So the whole system needs to be shifted if we're going to get the farming that we want. So what hopeful signs do you see in terms of getting to that system that we want? How do we do that? I'm not a realist. I believe we need wild and daring ideas, right? But we should think about how do we make them work. That's very much true. So what do you think? What's your how can you serve as a merchant of hope right now?
well, again, what makes me hopeful is that there are people tuning in to this conversation who have energy to do something. And I think every food system needs something else. Every farmer needs a different kind of support. I mean, we can talk in generalizations, but the main thing is like, find out, get engaged, wake up, give something, tell other people what there is to give in order to receive what we're talking about, the benefits of having good farmers tending the land, which is really on behalf of all of us, right? We all depend on the land to live, right? So that's what gives me hope. My own practice of cultivating connection to studying my interdependence and then asking every day, how do I enact this? How do I act right now that's going to be beneficial for all of the things I'm connected with? And it's different every day, and it's different for everyone. And I think just more and more people asking that question. So this is super vague, but in it is the particulars. If we give it energy, we will find something to do.
Spencer, I'm gonna ask you a question that we got, which is very similar, but see if you can address this. This is from Ursula King. These are enormous systemic issues, and every region of the country is different. But given this, from your perspective, what do you think is the most important thing people working on these very issues regionally can concentrate on?
That's a great question. I think that to kind of also address the last question, I think one glimmer of hope in what was otherwise an extremely dark time of the early pandemic was that Grow NYC was able to keep the green markets open throughout the pandemic in New York City. And it was not business as usual. It was people socially distancing, wearing gloves. It was, a logistical nightmare. But at the same time, it was people who were able to walk out of their door and walk to where they knew that there was food, because that food was coming from within, 200 miles of New York City. It was not, they didn't have to go into a store. They walked outside, and that thread was able to continue. And I think just any way in which the ability of farms to continue to feed people through all manner of challenges, and that any way that can be supported. And I would say that there is a major food insecurity problem. And I think there's also a major potential for that food insecurity problem to be solved by robust support for farmers to help fill in those gaps. It can't be farmers alone, because we already get paid what we get paid. But programs like New York State's Nourish New York, where there was money given to community organizations to buy products from farms to then feed through food banks and such, is just a really great opportunity. And I think there's a lot more opportunities for, whether it's faith organizations or communities, to really help these farmers, both by providing a market for their food, but also get together and help those farmers provide food for people that don't have access for food. And I think that right there is a real opportunity.
Yeah. All right. I have a feeling that we're at our end here.
Yes, we are. But I just want to thank all three of you so much. This has been really a fascinating conversation. And I love the fact that we don't have all the solutions, because we know we're up against some really serious issues. But I think it's wonderful to talk about what communities can do and help us really empower our communities to look at the local issue and to, as you say, support the farmer and make sure that the produce is healthy produce that is in our stores, in our towns. So thank you. It's just been fascinating. And this program is being recorded. This program, we hope, will go out to my community for sure in May, when we have a big community-wide climate action week going on. So I hope that you all will use this as well, and look forward to the next Eco-Justice for All dialogue series by the Temple of Understanding in our e-blasts, and go to our website for more information. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much for those who've contributed to this program. Blessings all, and happy Earth Day again.
Yes. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah,
Thank you,
wonderful.
Sarah.
Thanks.
Here, Spencer. It's great to talk.